Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Hey, everybody. This is Nutrition Radio. We've got our usual lineup of 4 topics for everybody today, but then we'll get to our introductions just quickly. We're going to talk about social media and how it can leave consumers confused from a nutrition perspective. Then we're going to talk about the science of fish oils. Omega-3 fats are not all the same, and we're going to talk about that. Afterwards, we're going to get a weight management tip from our co-host, Lonnie Ducote. Just do something. Good advice. And then number 4, the rant, no diets are magic. So if you want to know what that's about, stick around to the end. Having said that, you know from the intro, I am Lonnie Lowry. I'm a nutrition professor of about 20 years. I'm an industry and academic consultant, just helping those corporations do what they do. Okay, and we have Lonnie Ducote with us again.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, glad to be back again this week with some new topics for everyone. It's very early, so we're
it's
on
early
different
for you.
sides of the states. So if I'm trying to slug my swill here, but I'm hoping to sound alert and engage for everyone, which I am.
All right. No, sounds good. I know when I lived in San Diego, I felt that way. Like East Coast people were driving me nuts because they're in the early morning stuff. All right. Let's start with a quick listener comment from YouTube. This is from Gabby Fairbanks. She's a staple of the community that I've podcasted to over the years. She was just commenting on Lonnie Ducote's first episode. Really good info as usual. I enjoyed all the topics, especially the espresso and the fitness RPG angle. I might be able to get my family in on this. I use the Carbon app, and it also has all the restaurants and such in there, but no badges for staying on track. Flat face. Can't wait till the next episode. So thank you, Gabby. That's it's important that we have a community feedback.
Yeah, she was. I think she was the previous host, right? And she was saying she had family members kind of doing some kind of competition for walking and eating. Is that right?
Yeah. She likes because her family is far flung all over the world, basically. I think, and
yeah, kind of like in IRL, as the kids would say, in real life.
Right.
She didn't even need an app to do it.
Yep. All right. Having said that, let's get to our first topic on food trends.
Market news, food and fitness trends.
This is from the new IFT magazine, Institute of Food Technologists. I'd point anybody that wants to go look at IFT.org. They do a great job. This is kind of a magazine, kind of a journal, sort of quasi-lay. And if you want to know food trends, this is where I go. So this is one of the groups that I belong to. But this is called Social Media Leaves Consumers Confused. Nearly 7 in 10 consumers, 68%, who have viewed food content online say they have seen conflicting nutrition information on social media, according to a new study from the International Food Information Council, the IFIC. 4 in 10 respondents say they have come across content about food and nutrition on social media. 2/3 say they trust the content. Well, that's a little concerning. It depends on where it's from, what the source is. I mean, this is like, high school or even before. Consider the source. The survey found, even though that many agree that they've seen conflicting information. So 2/3 trust it, even though they've seen it conflicting. So it makes you wonder what they trust. That kind of is the next point. It says Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok are the most common platforms. About half of consumers reported trying a new recipe as part of a social media exposure. 42% reported trying a new brand because, again, of social media. Now, I find this interesting. Millennials and those with higher household income were more likely to report an issue with conflicting information. This gives me some hope that millennials, I know we have Gen Z now that are younger than millennials, but this does give me some hope that millennials are like a little bit more skeptical. We need some skepticism. I mean, it's okay to be open-minded, but not so open-minded your brain falls out. So anyway, it says, millennials and those with higher household income more likely to report an issue with conflicting information about foods, what to eat, what to avoid. We've all seen that stuff about never eat these 3 foods. And it's just full of crap. It's people just looking for attention, just the way the politicians will say stupid stuff now to get attention. Clicks above all, no matter how bad. Anyway, further, of those consumers who have seen conflicting information online, 60% say they agree that this makes them doubt their food choices. And again, we really need to think about what are the solid sources. That's why when you see stuff on this show, it's IFT, it's the American Society of Nutrition, it's these, yes, some are food industry, but academic sources where it's evidence-based. Like, what is the evidence? Consider the source. Anyway, it says only 6% say they've seen content on LinkedIn, but that was the social media platform they trust the most. So they're not really exposed a lot to food on there, but they look at that as more reputable, I suppose, followed by YouTube. Interesting.
Really? Wow, I must be out of the game because LinkedIn to me was like I thought you put your job resume on there.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. I think that might be why, because you do see professionals on there, and maybe it's perceived as more legitimate in that way. But I see a lot of people pumping content. I was talking to another professor not that long ago, and I'm like, you keep posting all these stories, and I think they're trying to expand. Like all social media, I don't think they can help themselves. And if they get more clicks and more views, then it becomes a little bit broader instead of just putting your resume up there, I think. But I agree. I look at it the same way.
Yeah, I have a job that doesn't really require to be networked like that, so I've never been on there myself. But I certainly see like you were saying, that the point is not necessarily to get information out, but it's to engage and to post a surprising headline where it's like, throw your carbohydrates in the trash, and there's a picture of someone with a piece of bread above the garbage disposal or something. So it's and then the next person's video who's trying to get your attention is take your bread out of the trash.
Exactly.
It might even be the same guy posting both videos. So
yeah,
just trying to think from both directions.
Absolutely. Like I'll see a chiropractor saying, why tomatoes are killing you, top things that are, and don't get me wrong. I've met chiropractors that did great work and other ones that really made me raise an eyebrow. It just depends on who you're talking to, and you have to kind of put it in context. I think the problem is if you're not educated in these fields, either whether it's healthcare or nutrition or exercise, whatever it is, if you don't have any context, no wonder people are confused. And I think people really need to realize that. And again, that's why we try to do education on this show. We often hear, if you're more educated, you're more likely to question it. Yes, because you had that hammered into you to be a little skeptical. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Science is tough. I think this will all tie into the two tips for later on. It's kind of like some context you're saying is so important, and that kind of applies to like the macro and the micro, where sometimes as I was researching these topics and stuff to bring up on the show, some scientist will find some interesting trait about like lycopene, for example, because we're talking about tomatoes. It's a very zoomed in look at this one thing and what it does in this very specific scenario, maybe even in a petri dish. And that somehow, because lycopene is in tomatoes, that gets turned into tomatoes are going to kill you or whatever.
Whatever angle, yeah. And I just think we need to realize that politicians and influencers, they'll say stupid things to get attention. And they're looking for a niche. If something's obvious, like it's, I was just bitching on Iron Radio about, blueberries are bad. Here's why it'll kill you. And no, usually not. Almost always not. You're doing that for attention, Now, later in this article, it does say millennials were more likely to trust the content. And that seems to contradict what I was reading earlier. I hope anybody can go get this online, ift.org. They have a lot of their material online. If not, the message stays the same. Be skeptical, consider the source. For goodness sake, people will do things just for attention because it's clicks above all. And attention, it doesn't always mean quality.
That's kind of doubly interesting to me because I'm on the upper end of the millennial thing. I think I'm 1 year away from not being one. Not that they're hard cutoff lines or whatever, but
right.
And my general attitude about most things is doubt first and then question it and then kind of go. Especially a headline. I mean, the headlines are written by editors usually and not scientists.
Right. Absolutely.
So, my friends and I kind of joke, like if I had a podcast, it would be, what does that mean? Or what do you mean by that? Just because it's
right.
People speak very casually but scientists generally, when they're writing something, speak very specifically.
Yes, they do. Science is reductionist, and that's why, people always try to paint with a broad brush. So is that good? Well, I don't have a piece of lab equipment that measures good. I'm sorry. You're asking for a value judgment. I'm talking about, a 5% statistically significant increase in this or that blood marker. So,
right.
Yeah. Having said that, this is going to spill into our next topic here on science trends.
Breaking nutrition science.
In this one, education level comes into this again. And again, there's lots of ways to get educated. Expose yourself to the right kind of teacher, and podcasts can provide that. They can also provide you with bunk. So usually, I wish it was the case that, educated podcasters got more attention, and can influence more people in a positive way to be skeptical and that kind of stuff, but that's not always sexy. So, but in this case, we talked about fish oils at the beginning. We introduced them. Omega-3 long-chain polyunsaturated fat intake. I just pulled something from NHANES. So if people aren't familiar, NHANES is the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. This is where we kind of get the finger on the pulse of Americans, at least, on what people are consuming. So this is over 44,000 people. They looked at intakes of, in this case, omega-3 fats of all kinds from 2003 to 2014. They did say, and I'm going to pull some random quotes here, supplement use increased EPA plus DHA intake, but only 7.4% of individuals consistently took these supplements. So that's almost surprising to me. I would think that more people would go after that, but I think a lot of people just don't realize how lopsided our fat intake is. We eat a lot of what I would consider junk fats, omega-6 fats overconsumed. We don't have the ratio down. It says overall, the N3, right, or omega-3 long-chain polyunsaturated fats, again, these essentially fish oils, but not just. We also have linolenic acid from like flax and walnuts. Intake was low, but our findings indicate that individuals with lower educational attainment and lower income are at even higher risk of not getting enough. And that's not surprising. So if you want to know what dose do I need then? Well, if you pull some, again, quotes from some of these papers, EPA plus DHA, because those are the active ingredients in fish oil. So if people aren't familiar, at least mostly what we're focusing on. EPA plus DHA intakes recommended by the World Health Organization is 200 to 250 milligrams a day. If you want to look at the National Institutes of Health and become more like a American focused, that 270 milligrams a day. So again, a little bit higher. Average intake in the U.S. is far below this number. And here it says an average daily mean intake of approximately 100 milligrams a day. And that depends on the survey. Sometimes it's even less. The American Heart Association suggests 2 servings of oily fish, like 8 ounces a week of oily fish, and that would give you about 250 milligrams a day. Now, there's more to be had here because there's sort of a dose-response curve with a lot of these omega-3 fats. Here's another quote for you. Participants taking supplements containing EPA and DHA specifically had higher intakes of EPA and DHA, again, those long-chain omega-3s, per 1,000 calories. So 163.9 and 144.5 milligrams of, respectively, EPA and DHA per 1,000 calories of intake. When compared to those who took kind of supplements that weren't specific to EPA and DHA, they got like 16 to 33 milligrams of these 2 omega-3s. And those who didn't take any supplements at all, 14.9 to 29.7 milligrams. So dismally low intake of this stuff. So what I did was I thought it depends on the survey and, are you doing it per day, per 1,000 calories, that kind of stuff. I wanted to offer a couple of quotes here. Here's one. This is an older paper, but it spells it out pretty clearly. Linolenic acid is another essential fatty acid. It's an omega-3. This time, again, it's an under-consumed omega-3 type. It has specific effects on its own, but can also elongate and desaturate in the body to have further impact. And again, it can move toward the EPA and DHA. Normally, we consider this weaker. And so that's actually what this says here. It says, commonly referred to as fish oils, the EPA and DHA are considered more potent pharmacologically than linolenic acid. So linolenic being the plant omega-3, if you will. And I know, Lonnie, you know all this stuff. But it says omega-3 fats have been shown to have a number of beneficial effects. And again, this depends on the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6, but reduced cardiac arrhythmias, potentially reduced mortality, possibly improved aspects of muscle recovery, cell membrane fluidity, altered nerve chemistry, and depression. So, mood stabilizing, if you will. Reduced inflammation is the big one. Decreased cartilage breakdown. There's just a lot of different benefits to these, and we don't get them. So I would urge anybody who listens to Nutrition Radio, talk to your doctor about consuming, I'd say, at least half a gram of EPA plus DHA a day. I get 2 to 3 grams a day. Again, it's kind of a dose response effect up to a point.
I think the answer is for you and me to double our intake, and then we'll bring the average up for everyone.
There you go. There you go.
That's how that works, right?
Pull up the mean.
Yeah, my mom's number will go up when I double my intake.
Right, yeah. So as an individual, I've always looked for, based on lots and lots of years of looking at this stuff, I'll consume around 2,000 milligrams total of EPA plus DHA. Now, EPA and DHA do slightly different things, and researchers will often point to, well, EPA is not DHA, right? Icosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid. These are different long-chain omega-3s. They might do some different things, like you'll see DHA oftentimes in infant formulas.
I'm glad you pronounced those. And didn't throw me the ball on that one.
Well, that's why we say, I think, EPA and DHA, because, oh my goodness. Partly, they displace arachidonic acid from cell membranes, and they affect the cell chemistry, like the secondary messengers in cells and that kind of stuff. It says toward this end, when we talk about omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, because that's really where it's at, it says we in Western diets, we consume something like 17 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3s, and the Institute of Medicine says it should be more like 5 to 1.
Is that number going up? I kind of remember back when I take a fish oil most days, but I kind of remember back when I was reading information on it, that number was in like the 6 to 9 to 1 range or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some researchers will say 2 to 1. I mean, some say 5 to 1. This actually, the Institute of Medicine says between 5 and 10 on the omega-6 side to 1 on the omega-3 side. So I think a lay way to say this is, you don't consume huge gram quantities of omega-3s like you do, let's say, monounsaturated fats. You dose them in milligrams. You dose the omega-3s. And what you're trying to do is, for all practical purposes, get the omega-3 up, because the ratio is going to be so poor. If you eat fats at all, you're going to get lots of omega-6 probably, especially living in the West. Like linoleic acid is the key omega-6. I've seen huge growing intakes in Britain, US, and Australia over the decades. Kind of scary. We're eating more and more of the omega-6s, so you just have to try to balance it out by seeking the omega-3s. Now, having said that, there might be a gender difference. So if you're a woman listening to the show, might be. So this is American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2011. Sex-specific differences in essential fat metabolism. It just teases apart the difference between EPA and DHA. Sex hormones may influence the synthesis of long-chain fats, which may lead to sex-specific differences in these long-chain polyunsaturated fats. I think we need to remember the omega-3s, just like the overdone omega-6s, they're all PUFA. They're polyunsaturated fats. Anyway, it says isotope studies have shown considerably higher conversion rate of the plant omega-3, which is linolenic acid, into the longer-chain omega-3s in women than in men. And then it says a review of the literature generally suggests there's higher contribution of DHA in blood lipids of women compared to men. So that's why you'll see some supplements that are focused mostly on EPA versus DHA. Like men have arguably less DHA. Again, not all studies suggest this, but they are slightly different. If you want to ask me what they do differently specifically, I'm going to say the research is still coming out on that, right? That's why we're looking for combined EPA and DHA. That's usually how they appear in fish. That's how they appear in supplements. But yeah, it's a real trend, and it calls for a lot of education. I even have a map when I show in the classroom of, here's fats at the top, it's like a concept map, and then how you have saturated fats, and then on the other side you have unsaturated, then you have polyunsaturated, and then a subcategory of the polyunsaturated would be the omega-3, like the fish oils. But the long story short is, yeah, you should probably just be getting more. And like I said, you'll tend to see effects starting about half a gram, 500 milligrams a day of omega-3s. I consume between 1 and 2,000. Some people consume 3,000. I do think you need to be careful. If you get real high, it's not like they're toxic, but one of the things they do is reduce blood clotting, which can be good, but you don't want to overdo that and end up with some kind of weird microbleed or something potentially. And again, I'm talking about the dose of EPA plus DHA, not the dose of the fish oil. You've got to turn the bottle over and look at the milligrams of EPA plus DHA. And again, I would recommend that for a lot of people, talk to your doctor, but I would recommend 500 milligrams as a start of combining those things. So sorry for the tutorial, but it's a complex issue, and people, they get blown away by it. And with the plant one being a little bit weaker, the linolenic acid, sometimes called ALA, alpha linolenic acid, it's just not as potent as the EPA and DHA. I'd go looking for that in fish oil or krill, something like that. So,
is there any significant difference between the kind or quality that you get from flax oil versus fish oil?
I don't know so much about the quality. Just that the ALA, the linolenic acid, the plant omega-3, is just a little bit less anti-inflammatory. It's less potent in the body, depending on how you define it. You know, I know you and I've been talking about that. Like, how do you define this? And, you know, context matters. Yeah. But generally considered not as potent. So I'd be seeking the EPA and the DHA. But people just get way too little. I'm interested in it for anti-inflammatory reasons. I have a family history of joint inflammation and arthritis and autoimmune disease and that kind of stuff, but also for mood stabilizing and lower blood pressure. Usually when you see this kind of pluripotent effect, oh my God, it fixes everything. It's a red flag. You're like, oh, that can't be right. But when you're replacing a deficiency, like a relative deficiency, like people evolved to get more omega-3s than we're doing. And, you know, and we're living on these junk fats, omega-6 pro-inflammatory fats and all that kind of stuff. So when you're replacing a relative deficiency, yes, you do see multiple benefits like that, whether it's mood, blood pressure, joints. You can get all that stuff. So there's a lot to be said there. I have supplemented omega-3s for, oh, my God, 30 years maybe. So now you do as well, I know.
Yeah, I probably have for 15 years, I would say. My numbers are a little hazy because I remember, you know, I read so much information on it back in the day that I made the decision to do it, and I haven't really kept up on it since then. I just kind of, you know, I have been doing it because I concluded it was a good idea back in the day.
Yeah, it's definitely a win for the fats column. You know, I grew up in an era, and it sounds like you're on the edge of this too. We got a whole lot of fat-free, low-fat, and then we're kind of like, oh, that didn't really work to turn around the obesity epidemic, right? Because fat was demonized. It had 9 calories per gram, blah, blah, blah. You know, people were getting obese, but now people are continuing to get obese despite me growing up, you know, in my teens and 20s in this like weird fat-free era. It didn't really work. And then people started embracing fats again. But again, you got to kind of fat matters, not just the amount, but the kind. And omega-3s are a big, big deal. Yeah, so I would suggest anybody talk to your doctor, do yourself a favor, go get your 500 to 1,000 even milligrams of EPA plus DHA. Yeah, you're really correcting a big problem in modern food systems.
I have to imagine, you know, there are people that supplement with it, probably the fitness and health conscious. So that the average, I was kind of joking earlier about bringing the average up, but I mean, there's got to be a lot of people out there at zero. Or no, well, nearly zero if they're eating
I mean, you look at
a couple of times a week or something. I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You look at those NHANES data and they're abysmally low, right?
Yeah, so that average is probably skewed somewhat heavily by the supplementing population.
I was surprised that only 7% of people supplement EPA and DHA, pills, if you will. That's surprising to me. I would think more people would be aware that they're not getting enough, healthy fish. It's not like Americans are eating a bunch of salmon all the time, twice a week, oily fish kind of thing, like the American Heart Association wants you to do.
Yeah.
It's just a huge imbalance. It's a pro-inflammatory balance. And then you think, well, obesity, diabetes, a lot of these things, they are low-grade inflammatory conditions. Well, gee, maybe we should consume more anti-inflammatory things like omega-3s. All right. Having said that, let's move on to our weight management tip.
Weight management tips.
So what do you have for us here?
So this ties into the thing we were talking about earlier with conflicting information, and sometimes the concept is called paralysis by analysis. Like there seems to be so much stuff coming at you that if you're motivated to make a change and are looking for something to do, you would think more information would be good, but to an extent it actually overloads you and you can kind of grind you to a halt instead of get you started down the right path. So the tip would be to just do something, or just add a little bit or take away a little bit. So this could, as it pertains to like a fitness newbie or a nutrition newbie that maybe they've decided to lose weight and this is the first show that they're listening to do so, it would be to just make some step. Don't get caught up in, should I walk or should I run or should I do burpees or do I have to go to the gym to do a treadmill or it's just pick something and start adding it and, monitor and see how things are going. And then if things are moving in the right direction, you're good. Or maybe you're doing 2 30-minute sessions of cardio and you want to add something because your weight loss has stalled, or if you're lifting weights, maybe your weight gain has stalled. You don't need to make a big dramatic change to get things moving in the right direction again. Just, add 5 minutes to each cardio session. I'm not sure if Chad Waterbury has ever come up on this particular show. I know he has on Iron Radio, but a lot of his programs used to have things like you would start at like 10 minutes of cardio a couple of times a week, and then you would just add 2 minutes to it as the progression. So you don't need to make these huge dramatic changes. So just, pick something and add a little bit to it as the weeks go on. So that's maybe for a beginner, and then at the extreme end, for the people, maybe you're doing a bodybuilding show or something, that kind of applies as well. I remember doing that back when I think I brought up last week, I was doing the Get Shredded diet from John Berardi. So that was actually very easy to use this principle on, because a couple of the meals were like, I would do 3 eggs, a piece of cheese, and a piece of bacon or something. And so as I got closer and closer to the show, I just took out an egg. So I just, I knew how many calories were in it, but I wasn't even counting calories per se. I was counting numerical pieces of food I was eating.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because I would do that with clients in the past. Like, you could do it in portion sizes. Like, if you start by eating 2 potatoes, go to 1.5, and then go to 1. You don't have to count every macro. What you're saying to me, I'm reminded of that old adage: a mediocre plan started now is better than a perfect plan started later, right? So
that's a good way to
just get a baseline that then you can tweak. In fact, we were just talking about that with weight training on the other podcast, which was, instead of having 17 items on your list that you feel like you need to do in the gym, how about just prioritize, pick 3, and stick with those? Basic meat and potatoes kind of movements, like squat and bench and deadlift. Just do those. And then you can add other things, or you can do variations on them or whatever. But then you don't feel like you got to do these 17 different things. It's overwhelming. You won't do it. It's kind of to your point, right? It's just, you keep it fairly.
Yeah, it's like, do I do full body or split or upper lower? It's like, just pick one. They all have some merit. There's merit to everything. Some of the, Skip LaCour, you probably remember him. He's kind of fallen off in popularity, I've noticed. It's hard to stay popular for 30 years, I guess. His thing used to be there's no 10s and zeros. Like so if you're doing something, they're wanting that 10 out of 10 training program or diet. And if they aren't doing that 10 out of 10, it feels like they're doing the 0 out of 10. But in reality, like the thing that maybe it's a 9.8 instead of a 10. But like, if you're in the gym and you're walking and you're exercising and moving and lifting weights, like maybe you're not doing the 10 out of 10, 100% perfect program, but it's probably an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. So there's still something there, and it's going to be good.
Now, how would you do this with diet then? I mean, I know you started with basically a low carb kind of approach, that get shredded diet. What would you suggest as a real basic starter? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
Sure.
Even if it's mediocre planned to get people started, like a Mediterranean diet, something that's sane and doable, I don't know. What would you do?
So I think that could be applied in that, and this actually ties into the topic of the fitness rant I was going to bring up, but we can roll right into it afterwards. So I would just say, pick a diet that looks appealing to you and start it. Don't get caught up in, is it going to do this biochemically and, all of that stuff. Just pick a diet that looks appealing and start it.
Yeah. I mean, people have different genes. We were just talking about that. Like precision medicine is a thing. People are going to respond differently, or a behavioral type thing, not just genetic, but behaviors. My wife and I tried the almost zero carb diet a couple of times. And, after doing it for a week, we're like, you know what? Not worth it. I don't think that's the right one for us. It works good for some people. It works great. Keto works great for some people. I rather go lower carb, lower refined carb, that kind of thing, but not eliminate them. And I would argue people don't go straight to social media to get your little template. I would go somewhere like the Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, some of these places, or even just, myplate.gov, somewhere where you could get some basic ideas and not overanalyze it. It's a great point, Lonnie, about I've seen biochemists. They go on and on about some nuance, some change in an enzyme in a biochemical pathway, and then they try to logic out like what's going to happen. You're like, yeah, but you don't know that, right? I used to have an old professor. He'd say, Lonnie, just because it's logical doesn't mean it's physiological, right? So in other words, you got to go look. It doesn't mean it's going to have a clinical relevance. So, cutting back on something seems to be what a lot of people need to do, even if it's just like sugar or high fructose corn syrup or stuff that we know that we probably overdo, added sugars, whatever it might be. But it's great advice. Like let's start something, get started somewhere. And if you have to ask your doctor. But now he or she is probably not going to have a nice plan set up for you. They might refer you to a dietitian or something, but you got to get started on something that's doable. Yeah. All right, you said so. This is going to bleed into the rant. So it's sort of the KISS principle. Keep it simple.
Rant product review or recipes.
This would be, I've kind of headlined it as "No Diets Are Magic," and I tried to find this little infographic I read many years ago where it was on the one side it had the diet, and it was like Mediterranean, keto, Atkins. Pick a name of a diet and put it on the left. And then it had in the middle bracket or the middle column there was like the claim of the diet or the hook. And then on the right side it was like, how does it work? And then all of them were just, you eat less calories than you expend. So just kind of it boiled it down to that. So that was kind of the idea of it. Like yes, maybe some diet is doing something and maybe you're producing ketones on this one or doing something on that one. But really, all you need to do is create that calorie deficit. So it's a little bit of that analysis paralysis idea again, where it's like, I'm on the Mediterranean diet and I forgot to use olive oil, so my whole thing is I'm not on the Mediterranean diet anymore or whatever. So it's like there's no, there's no quote unquote magic happening with the Mediterranean diet. It's just a way to eat that is healthy, and hopefully you can do it for a sustainable period of time and achieve your nutrition goal with it. Or like Atkins, I think, my brother who is, a few years ahead of me in the whole fitness and nutrition thing, he put me on Atkins like the year or two before it kind of caught fire, and I think that was maybe let's just call it the year 2000. And it was like, God, you'd think it was almost the discovery of food again back then, with the way every news story and everything was talking about, oh my God, the carbohydrates were the whole thing, and actually what we want to be doing is this. And like I said, maybe there is a little something there, but at the end of the day, no, you actually really can't eat all the bacon and beef and ribs you want. You still have to be in a calorie deficit to lose the weight. Or you have to be eating more calories than you want if your plan is weight gain. Like, even if you're eating, whether it be rice and chicken breast or ribs and bacon, it's like you still have to be following
laws of physics.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's just, like I said, just analysis paralysis. Just pick something, go with it. Maybe you're not doing that 10 out of 10 magic diet that is 100% custom tailored to your body and physiology and stuff. But if you're getting the numbers right, eventually you'll be moving in the right direction.
Right. To your point about Atkins being so popular, I read in its heyday, brand recognition for Atkins was higher than any product in history. Now, I'm skeptical of that, but oh my God, that really does point to the fact that everybody started saying, oh, it's this. And it was such a swing from, carbs are good to carbs are bad. I'm not surprised that it did get huge recognition. But at the same time, yeah, good point. Same thing with like when people try to dodge gluten. Oh, gluten, I lost weight on that. Yeah, well, you're not eating bread anymore. You're not eating a bunch of refined carbs. Did you think about that? I bet you didn't. You're asked a lot of those people, I've seen interviews, what is gluten? They can't even tell you what it is. So, it's ultimately, yeah, getting in a negative energy balance, like I said, following the laws of physics, it's got to be part of the equation. If you want to be smaller, you have to put less energy into the system. And I know it gets complicated because of resting metabolism and the dynamism of metabolism, how it goes up and down. But ultimately, yeah, whether it's low carb, low fat, you got to be in a calorie deficit to lose and a calorie surplus to gain, including muscle gain. It's a good point. So would you suggest that people, it's just what resonates with you when you pick a diet then?
I think that's how I've trended over the years. As I've advised people and given it, seen people that get results versus don't. I think the number one thing is, I don't know, enjoyability. Is that a word? Where it's like, you can't, if someone loves steak and eggs, like, even if the vegan diet did something amazing and different in the body than that kind of a diet, they're just not going to stick with it.
Behavior.
I mean, maybe the person with the most willpower on the planet could do it, but if someone is craving something all the time and you're putting them on a diet that doesn't have it or something like it, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. I think compliance is a big word that comes up a lot. Consistency and compliance. If you can't comply with something over time and give it at least several weeks, right? You can't try one of these new diets every other week. Well, that didn't work. It's like it takes your body a time to adapt. We were just talking about this as well. Gut microbiota, enzyme changes throughout your body and your digestive tract and all your tissues. It takes a while for these things to happen. Certainly from a weight loss or weight gain perspective, it's going to take probably many weeks, right? Several weeks to a few months before you decide to, I can't measure any differences. I mean, even in a lab, you need at least 6 or 8 weeks to look at body comp changes. And even then, you'd probably questioning it unless you have a DEXA or some kind of imaging unit. So, yeah, you can't just do this every 2 weeks and be like, unless you're judging it based on energy levels or your ability to comply. But it's a good point about, if you can't be consistent with something for at least several weeks.
Yeah, and just, if you find yourself not being consistent with the diet, like I said, the good news is there's nothing magic that diet is doing.
Yeah.
As long as you're getting you're eating in a healthful manner, there's nothing magic about the Mediterranean that makes their diet X, Y, or Z, per se.
Right.
Just, it has a good amount of nutrients, and it tends to have people eat in a certain way that they lose weight. So that's why it's, the quote unquote the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah, more vegetables, seafood, right, olive oil. Yeah.
But you could just as easily achieve your goal on some other diet that isn't.
Yeah, intermittent fasting, right? Where you're not even counting anything, you're just eating within this window every day kind of thing, or across the week.
Right,
yeah.
And I think so much emphasis, especially and I'm sure it's always been this way to an extent, but like the social media landscape is like, how often do you hear about intermittent fasting? And it's not just that, you probably will eat less calories in 8 hours than you will in 16 hours. Like, the things I hear the most about it are like GH release and ghrelin and leptin and this
mechanism.
And that. Like, like I said, maybe there is a little something to that, but it's not going to be so profound that, like, you can violate certain other dietary principles and still succeed on it, because it's just, like I said, there's no magic to it. It's just you're eating less than you need, and so you lose weight.
Yeah. And hormonal changes could be part of it. Gut microbiota could be part of it. But you're right. If you over focus on a mechanism, I've seen hardcore scientists do it. I've seen gurus do it. I was once invited to write a book from a recognizable publisher, and they said, Lonnie, we want you to write a book. And the reader hook, this is directly according to what you were just saying, the reader hook is that cortisol is the reason everyone is fat. Go. And I said, I can't do it. I won't do that. With all due respect, I won't do that. You're trying to blame cortisol, and I'm not saying cortisol is a great thing and people should be stressed out and have a lot of belly fat and blah, blah, blah. But what you're talking about is you're overblowing this reader hook to the point that that's not magic. That's not the reason everyone is fat. It's certainly not helping, but I'm not going to do that for you. And so it was, to me, it was like an ethical, a moral victory in a way to say that. But at the same time, there's a lot of authors who'd be like, all right, let me see how I can spin this for you. And to your point, there's no one magical diet. That's certainly not it. Is it contributory? Sure. So is low fish oil intake. So is sugar intake. So is lack of physical activity, muscular activity. And you're right. This does go back to the earlier section of the show about, getting going with a plan. Find something that you can get going with.
Right. And you're not missing out on some other, the plan you're on is probably going to be good enough. You're not missing out on some magical X factor that this other thing has, that, if only I had X in my diet, then it would be, this miracle thing that caused everything to fall off immediately and add slabs of muscle to my frame, that kind of thing.
Oh, totally. I mean, it was a couple of months ago now. There was a guy all over YouTube heavily publishing stuff. By the way, I hate when they'll buy huge quote unquote ads, but it looks like an episode. I don't know how much money they just spent, but it looks like they have a lot of hits, and they paid for that. And, but anyway, there was a guy, and he was saying exercise doesn't work, cardio doesn't work. And you get these people, and they're doing it because they need a niche. They're trying to carve a marketing niche, right? I mean, I am no runner. I never have been, not a big fan. But I'm not going to stand here and tell you that aerobic exercise is bad for you. I'm never going to tell you that. But so you might say, why are they doing that? Do they have the secret? Do they have the inside track? No, they don't. They're over focusing on a magical mechanism, to your point, right? And whatever that might be, that you need to build muscle to have a higher metabolic rate, resting metabolic rate, whatever it is. Whatever they're saying, they're giving bad advice. They're trying to carve a niche that doesn't really exist, so they're going to invent one that's full of crap, right? And that's when things become a problem. And yes, they do it with fitness and with nutrition all the time. Like we said, why you should always avoid these 5 foods. It's like, well, and some of the times the foods on that list, they're specifically choosing them to get a rise out of people. Like, I thought blueberries were good. I thought, oats were good, whatever it might be. And it's very frustrating, as a nutrition educator, to try to deal with that kind of stuff, because they're spending lots and lots of money to create these bull crap niches that shouldn't exist because they're not real. And it's all about some weird little mechanism. Because to your point, it's not that sexy to say moderation is good. You're going to have to eat less than you burn.
Right. Yeah, there's that kind of everything you know about X is wrong.
Exactly. Yes.
And there's just, a lot of these rants that I've lined up are kind of inspired by, the traps that I have fallen into over the decades and the realizations I had on the other end of it. Because after valuable. I did that Get Shredded diet, I was like, I was praying at the Church of Berardi, like, oh, this is it. Like, I just needed to eat this, and in this way over time, and there you go. So I was telling anyone who asked me, I was like, just do that diet.
Yeah,
it's the magic diet that does the thing. But my wife, like, when she goes low carb, like her just, it really does not sit well with whatever is going on in her physiology. It just, her, it just sours the enjoyment in her life. So it's not a sustainable way for her to diet. So
right. Even if you think there's something magical about, the insulin growth hormone IGF-1 axis or something like that. It's like, but I can't stick with it. I don't have any energy or whatever. I get painful.
We did a cheat meal. I had her on it, like, this is probably 8 or 9 years ago or something, where she, like, stuck with it. God bless her. I can only imagine the misery she was in. But she did it for a week, and then our cheat meal that week was Pizza Hut, and she had these breadsticks from there, and just, like, the veil lifted from her body that day. It was like she could never go back.
Oh, right.
We had this, like, come to Jesus moment over these Pizza Hut breadsticks.
Well, and again, the problem, I think, comes when a commercially interested person, they try to say or insinuate at least there's something magical about these foods, whatever the mix of them. They're almost like the old school, like, what's the word, apothecary kind of, like, I'm going to mix this in a very formulated way, and you've got to do it just like this. We were just talking about the paleo diet, in fact, on Iron Radio, and Phil's like, he was just on a tirade online at one point about, because they started saying, no, in the official paleo diet, you can have sweet potatoes, but not white potatoes. And he's like, oh, here we go, right? Because typically that diet started with no starchy tubers, no beans, no grains kind of thing. And you can really poke a lot of holes in that kind of stuff when you start looking at the archaeological record and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's that, to your point, is that's that weird magical. There's no magical diet. There's nothing magic about a sweet potato or a yam versus a white potato, which, by the way, there's different kinds of that too. Brown skinned, red skinned, they have different glycemic indices. But that they don't go there though. They just say, no, this is what we're going to believe, like you said, in our religion, if you will. You're talking about, like, making your offering at the altar of this or that religion. And people start becoming such zealots that they won't even be open-minded enough to listen to other alternatives because they are believing in that magic, So it's good advice. And it's good that you're sharing from personal experience, right? People need to hear this. Like, these are some of the traps I fell into, so.
Yeah, and I started out when I was 18, half a lifetime ago, almost, 18, 19. All of these things are all well-crafted things by, clever individuals to get you to think their way, and with some kind of thing to sell you at the end of the pitch, of course. But it's like, it's very, very easy to fall into something and get stuck in it. And think that, oh no, I'm not able to do. I used to take, like, protein shakes and stuff to Disneyland to stay on my diet, because if I didn't eat that way, then my whole thing was going to crumble. And so it's like, you don't need to be as rigid as some people lead you to believe because they have the magic formula, and if you stray from it, everything that you've worked for is going to go away and all that.
Yeah, that's where it becomes like a weird belief system, like you've committed some sin or something, or you're stressed out. I know what you're saying. I had an old friend, Steph. She's another dietitian, and she would say, progress, not perfection, right? In other words, if you make a mistake, whatever diet you're following, and it is good to get with a program and follow it. Now, you have to be careful, because some of these diets, they start hacking away parts of the food guide pyramid, if you will. That's an old school way to look at it. And I don't like when you remove huge sections, because it reduces variety, and I think that's usually a problem. But yeah, when you fall off the wagon for a day, you can't freak out about it. It can't become magical yeah, you always have to scrutinize a little bit, but also think about what are the first principles. Eat fewer calories or eat more if you're trying to gain. Yes, maintain variety. Try to avoid, for the most part, ultra-processed foods. Food processing is not always bad, but okay. There are some basic things that people just need to get down. Like one of the things I would focus on early on, I kind of came around to was try to eat X number of chicken breasts a day, skinless, boneless chicken breasts, because it's lots of protein. Again, I was exercising, so it was helpful there. But, everything else, because if you're eating a certain number of chicken breasts a day, you're not eating Big Macs, you're not eating French fries, you're full of chicken breasts. So people just need something, I think, to get started and not believe that there's something necessarily magical about it. And it's not like I only ate chicken breasts. I'm not saying that. I was eating vegetables. I was eating other stuff, of course. But it was something that I felt like I was able to do. Or people want to count protein. Instead of counting all your macros, if you could get yourself, a gram per pound, I know that's kind of a lot for a lot of people, but of a lean protein source, I don't mean Big Macs, that's not a bad place to start. There are different ways that you can, if you have to talk to your doctor, but I love the idea that there's nothing magical, because you're right. Early on, when you don't know enough about it, you're banking on it. Like, what's magical here? I have to be part of this cult. It's just.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people selling it. I remember this like a long time ago. I was cracking up at an old episode of Iron Radio because you used to say you would eat things in sixes, like you would have 6 packets of oatmeal or like 6 eggs or something, and it's just kind of. I remember laughing at it back then just because it sounded so. I was imagining you at your office eating, just a box of oatmeal or something. But even that was kind of funny to me. Like as I think about it now, you were on like the 6 diet.
Oh, right. Yeah, nothing magical there. I was just waiting for me to get more calories because, again, with portions instead of counting grams, I'm just like, I'm going to have to eat, a lot of food. So I'd look at a label, and if whatever a serving was, I would try to, sextuple it. I don't know. Absolutely.
Yeah, the magic happens when you eat 6.
No, right. Yeah, nothing magic about the 6. I was just trying to get my calories up to 4,500 calories every day, and needed a way to do it. Anyway. All right. Well, good stuff. I appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
We'll be back next week, everybody, with 4 more topics. But for now, we'll see you later.
The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.